Hey, it's Amelia. Today I'm doing a video that's a little different than normal. I'm going to be talking about makeup hoarding and the beauty community, but with a little bit of a twist as I'm going to be talking about mental health. This video was inspired by Hannah Louise Poston's May check-in video for her no-buy of 2018. I'm going to link that video below. I was watching it and I just had a lot of different thoughts that I wanted to add to what she was saying, but I couldn't necessarily fit it into a comment or an Instagram post, so I thought I would do a video. I wanted to note that when I was taking notes on her video, I, for the most part, was putting her words in quotation marks, so I would know that they're not my thoughts. But if I accidentally say something that she had said, thinking it was my idea, and that's why I wrote it down, then just know that I am aware that it was her idea, and I just said it wrong, or I wrote it in a way that I didn't make it clear that it wasn't my thought to begin with. I also wanted to quickly give a disclaimer as to why I think I'm qualified to make this video, especially because it's talking about mental health. I feel like I'm at an intersection between having had hoarding disorder, being a part of the beauty community, and having education in psychology. I don't have my degree yet. I actually need one more class to get my degree this spring, so I just need one more elective, and I'm taking childhood abnormal psychology in the spring. But I thought, since I'm not going to be talking much about child mental health in this video, it's not really a necessity for me to tell you what I think. I am getting a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from a really good university. I got an A in my abnormal psychology class, and that was taught by a really good professor. I would tell you where I go to school and who it is in case you want to know, but I still go to school there, so I don't really want to give out that information. But I am not going into clinical psychology. I'm not a therapist. I am not going to grad school for mental health. I did not take the advanced course. For each type of mental disorders, like mood disorders or substance abuse, you can take an extra class just dedicated to that. I did not take a class that talks about hoarding disorder, but I have a good understanding of the diagnostics, and just to be sure, I printed out from the International OCD Foundation. They put what the DSM-5 says. Another disclaimer is, I think the best thing to do when you think you might have a disorder is to do a lot of research, and so this video is not meant to be comprehensively describing this disorder or telling you that you have it. It's actually not saying, this video isn't about saying people have this disorder. I more wanted to talk about how this disorder relates to the beauty community as a whole, which I think is an interesting topic, especially because I also am getting a minor in sociology, and I feel like sometimes abnormal thinking is a broader scale than just an individual with a disorder. So that's what this video is about, and if you find that interesting, then I guess you can keep watching. So the first thing I want to do is just read through what hoarding disorder is from the DSM and talk about why I think this is relevant to the beauty community, and as the title should say, something about makeup hoarding. Because in the community, we say hoarding a lot as a hyperbolic term to mean buying a lot of makeup or having a lot of makeup, and in a lot of cases, that's all it means, but I do think there are cases where it means a little more than that. So, as I said before, this is from the International OCD Foundation. Hoarding disorder is considered compulsive, so that's why it's related. Based on the DSM-5, the first little thing on the list is persistent difficulty discarding or parting with possessions regardless of their actual value. That has a lot to do with declutters and why someone like myself can't declutter. And when it says difficulty, I want to emphasize that difficulty is different from not wanting to, but wanting to declutter. So a normal person might want to have less things, but they won't declutter because they like what they have. Someone with hoarding disorder experiences anxiety and distress when it comes to getting rid of things, even something that is not of value, such as garbage, or old newspaper, something that somebody else would be like, why would I hold on to this? Someone with a disorder like this can recognize that it's garbage but not want to get rid of it. An example for me, personally, is I can't get rid of makeup palettes after I pan them. And there's no real value to them once I finish them, but for some reason I just can't get rid of them. There is a myth that, and it goes along with the hoarding shows, where people think that people with hoarding disorder aren't able to acknowledge that what they're hoarding is crap, or that the hoarding is a problem. And there are people who aren't able to identify that, but that isn't always the case. The problem is, even if you can recognize it, you might have too much anxiety around getting rid of things to be able to do that. Number 2 is, this difficulty is due to a perceived need to save the items and to distress associated with discarding them. So I just talked about the distress thing. Perceived need to save the items, I want to talk about a little more, because within the beauty community, this is going back to Hannah's video. So with hoarding disorder, your mindset is to want to keep everything, and it becomes something that you can easily, how do I want to say this? You can it's like gaining a skill to be able to convince yourself to keep anything no matter what. It's the idea that even if you don't use it, don't need it, haven't looked at it in a long time, don't even remember owning it, you will be able to convince yourself that you might need it, or that you do need it, or that you want it when you don't. So someone with hoarding disorder could decide that their giant a hoard of newspapers is useful because in the future they'll want to read them. It doesn't matter if those newspapers had been so hidden underneath the hoard of everything else that they didn't even know it was there and they never actually plan on reading it. The disorder will make it so you can't get rid of the anxiety that comes from, but what if I need it? And because I had hoarding as a child, I feel like a lot of these thought processes showed itself more as feelings. So it had more to do with the distress around getting rid of something that I need, rather than logically thinking to myself, or illogically thinking to myself, I need this thing for this purpose. It was like a feeling that I need it and I can't get rid of it. This kind of goes along with something that Hannah was saying in her video about one beauty guru in particular who was saying that recommending you to buy a limited edition palette even though it was kind of mediocre because it was limited edition. That is the kind of thought process that someone who has a problem acquiring things from a mental disorder would reason. To me, that kind of thought process is abnormal in the sense of a mental disorder. And she was talking about the, I'm quoting, toxicity of their point of view, and the habits and behaviors they have that are like that she said she no longer wanted to engage in. And I wanted to comment that this toxicity and these behaviors are reminiscent to me of a mental illness. And I'm not saying that this beauty guru or Hannah have a mental illness. I don't think she does, and I don't think the beauty guru does, because it sounds like she was just trying to recommend something. But this mentality is not normal, and it reminds me of a time where I was very sick mentally. Not that I'm completely better, but hearing about what these toxic behaviors and habits and thought processes reminded me of my own mental illness. The next thing on the list is The difficulty discarding possessions results in the accumulation of possessions that congest and clutter active living areas and substantially compromises their intended use. This is what you normally see on those hoarding shows where their whole house is so covered you can't even see the floor. If living areas are uncluttered, it is only because the interventions of third parties, family members, cleaners, authorities. When I was a child, I could not see the floor of my room. Like, it's actually kind of a weird feeling to me now to be able to see the floor and to, like, walk on it. And one of the things that I do now as an adult is I won't clean my room because there's some sort of comfort with having the floor covered in stuff. Like, there's a relieving feeling to having a clean room, but I still have comfort in having a cluttered space. And I am able to recognize, because I understand the disorder, and I'm able to pick out what's a normal thought and what's a disordered thought now. I'm able to recognize that that feeling is not normal. Most people would not find comfort in having all their crap all over the floor, but to me, something about covering the floor and just having stuff everywhere is comforting. And I think that relates to the beauty community, in that having more stuff is not only a good feeling, but we sort of idolize it in the community, where maybe not necessarily in the panning community, but most people who come to the panning and no buy and low buy community do so after being a part of the broader community, where having large collections is such a value that the best of the best in the community are those with dedicated rooms or large spaces to makeup. Like, the more the better. And it's interesting because I don't think these people that have these large beauty rooms are hoarders. I don't think they have this specific mental disorder, but it's the same kind of pattern as someone who does have it, only a little more organized, a little more neat. Number 4 is the hoarding causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, including maintaining a safe environment for self or others. So what I want to touch on is that clinically significant distress or impairment is not what I see happening in most people, even in the panning community and no-buy community of people who want less. Clinically significant distress is indicative of this being an anxiety disorder, kind of like an OCD, like a compulsive disorder. It's kind of, OCD is kind of like an anxiety disorder, but now it's considered separate. But regardless, this level of distress is something that I have a hard time dealing with, and this is why I don't do makeup declutters often or give up makeup. It isn't even about wanting the makeup, it's just like perceived value in the item that isn't necessarily there. I just can't get rid of things. And this past month, I've actually decluttered every single area of my life except makeup and my hoarder drawer, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I was going through all the stuff in my attic. I have a storage bin of sentimental items, and there was just stuff that I look at it now, I'm like, this is garbage. Why did I keep this? And it's sort of like I had mentally gotten to a really good place where I don't keep on to legitimate trash anymore. But then I went to the attic to clean stuff out, and I'm like, oh, I was holding on to legitimate pieces of shit. Like, this is garbage. Like, why am I holding on to this? And it's because I had a sentimental value attached to it that wasn't real, and it would have given me a lot of genuine anxiety to get rid of it. And I see a lot of people who struggle to declutter their own collections, and I don't think it's necessarily because everyone is a hoarder, but I see that sort of like stress around getting rid of things. Now it's a little different because now declutter videos have become like trendy, but I just think it's interesting that I know I'm like, this is a mental illness that I've had to deal with my whole life, But to see it in other people who aren't someone with that illness is odd. And I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but the reason I want to talk about this is because I believe there's a number of people with hoarding disorder, whether they know it or not, that have become attracted to this community because they want to get help. The reason I even found the panning community back in the day is because I, as a child trying to figure out how to deal with this, I watched some like hoarding shows, but they weren't like the ones now. They were like actually helpful to people, and they actually treated people properly. But anyways, as an extension of becoming really, not the word obsessed. I can't think of another word. The word obsessed means something different than how people use it, and I don't like using that word, but I can't think of the word. So I was just really into watching these cleaning shows, and I stumbled upon Pink So Foxy's Declutter series, and it like changed my whole life. It put words to how I wanted to feel, and I was able to take things that she's saying in the video and apply it to my own life. Like at one point in the video, she had a lipstick that she was keeping in a box because she really thought the box was pretty, and she was saying, you know, down the line I'm going to end up getting rid of this box, so why don't I just get rid of it now? And then she crumples up the box and throws it out. And to me, as a child that legitimately holds on to crap and like stuff that doesn't matter, like boxes to things, it like gave me a way to do the same thing with my own stuff, because I could literally in my mind repeat what she said, like, I'm going to get rid of this eventually anyway, might as well do it now, or something like that, where I'm able to, I don't know, I guess it's empowering in that it put words to, it gave me a script on how I want to be able to act at a time where I didn't even have the words to put to how I was feeling. Number 6, the hoarding is not better explained by the symptoms of another mental disorder, obsessions and obsessive compulsive disorder, decreased energy and major depressive disorder, delusions and schizophrenia, or another psychotic disorder, cognitive deficits and major neurocognitive disorder, restricted interests in autism spectrum disorder. What I find interesting about that is the delusions and schizophrenia. As a hoarder, the thought processes you have to go through to convince yourself to keep something is like being delusional. And I'm not saying that like using the word delusional in a non-clinical way to be hyperbolic. I mean, literally sometimes I'm like, I literally am insane because I convinced myself that I need something. Like, so an example would be in my sentimental box, high school chemistry, we did a group project where we were learning about moles, like not the animal, but the number or whatever. I don't remember math. So we made the mole animals as a project, as a fun project, and it was a group between me and 2 of my friends at the time. And I held on to them because they brought back the happy memory of being in that class with those friends. But they were like pieces of cloth wrapped around crumpled paper, stapled together, like shitty arts and crafts. A normal person would probably throw that out after the assignment was done and be able to hold on to the memory of being in that class with their friends. But I don't deal with things that way. So I thought, I need to hold on to these and put them in my sentimental box because I don't want to forget those happy memories. And the idea that if something reminds you of something, it's automatically sentimental and you have to keep it is kind of like a delusional mental gymnastics that you have to do, because you do have to convince yourself of these things in order to actually genuinely hold on to them and believe it. Like, I genuinely believed I needed to hold on to those. And then last week I just picked them out of the box and I'm like, why did I hold on to this? This is like legitimate garbage. But I couldn't let go of them before. And it's been long enough now where I'm like, I have the memories of being in that class and having those friends, even though I don't talk to them anymore. And I can hold on to them in my mind, and I don't need garbage to remind me of them. There is no genuine sentimental value to these, but I had convinced myself to the point of being a little delusional that I needed them. And to bring that back to makeup, I see people holding on to things that they don't like for no good reason. I talked about it a little bit in I made a video where I was like ranting about declutter videos, but one of the things that really bothers me is when people say, I don't use this, I don't like it, but I'm going to keep it because blah, blah, blah. And then they give a reason that doesn't make sense. Like, I think the example I used was someone had 2 foundations and one of them was in a color that was way too dark for them. And they were like, I don't really like it, I don't use it, I don't cream contour, but I'm going to keep it in case I want to cream contour with it. That, to me, is the kind of explanation a hoarder would give to keep something that they don't want. But this is someone who doesn't have a disorder, most likely, based on what I observed, not that I'm an expert. And they had this, like, hoarder mentality around makeup. And I'm like, why is this happening? I guess that's sort of the question of this video is, why is this happening? Why, when I am looking at it from the perspective of being able to pick out what's a hoarder thought or behavior and what isn't, why am I seeing this so much in the community? Why am I seeing legitimate makeup hoarding, not just makeup collecting, but legit makeup hoarding? And I don't think it can be explained just by saying that a lot of hoarders are attracted to this community, because panning things and decluttering and doing no-buys is relevant to how someone might try to treat themselves for the disorder. I think it's broader than that, and I'm not saying I have the answers. I just find that interesting and also a little scary. And in Hannah's words, it's like a toxic thing. It's toxicity in the sense of mental illness, like abnormal thoughts that cause distress in someone's life. Like, the reason hoarding is a mental disorder is because it takes over your life, and in a lot of ways it ruins relationships, sometimes people have hoarding along with agoraphobia or social anxiety. These aren't things that are easy to just live with. Like, it takes over your life, and it's concerning to me that this is happening with people just who are into makeup. Like, we're supposed to be makeup enthusiasts, but instead we're acting, for lack of a better word, crazy. I'm seeing these connections, and I'm not seeing anyone pointing them out. And maybe it's because I haven't been watching enough makeup videos, but I don't know. The last note on this is the DSM-5 also calls for the clinician to specify whether the individual is also experiencing excessive acquisition. Example, do they acquire items that they don't need and for which they don't have space in their home? And to specify the person's level of insight, good, fair, poor, or absent/delusional. What I'm seeing in the community is excessive acquisition and absent insight. And that's sort of the point of this video, is we can identify as makeup hoarding, but we're not really talking about what that means. And I'm seeing people who, how do I say this? People in the hoarding community. People in the panning community who have excessive acquisition and maybe good or fair insight, but because we're not addressing that this is a disorder, this is something abnormal, this is beyond just normal makeup collecting, people aren't getting better. And a note that I wanted to make that I think is extremely important is we have sort of this in the culture broadly, we have this idea that it's black and white, you're either sick or you're healthy, like you're either mentally ill or you're normal. And one of the big takeaways of classes I've taken on mental health is everyone is on a continuum from normal to abnormal. you can have any one of these symptoms or signs, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all the way to the abnormal side of things to be a problem that should be treated. And that's where sort of like hoarder tendencies comes in, is you can have a tendency to buy a lot of things you don't need, or a tendency to hold on to things you don't need without having hoarding disorder. And in addition to that, you don't have to have a mental illness for therapy to benefit you, especially if you feel like one or two or more of these symptoms is stronger on the abnormal side than it is on the normal. If you feel great distress or anxiety around getting rid of things, or you feel like you can't stop yourself from buying things, that is a sign that therapy may be helpful for you, whether you have a mental illness or not. And this is going back to Hannah's video where she talked about resisting impulses and the idea that you can resist them. And when you're going on a no-buy, it's a choice whether you break your no-buy or not. And she talked about how we have language like, I'm going to try not to buy anything, and stuff like that, where we set ourselves up to almost have an out with our no-buys. And I wanted to add to that, if you are someone who says stuff like that, like you're going to try, or like you're not sure if you can, and you genuinely mean it, you're not being hyperbolic, that is a sign of an impulse control problem that could be abnormal in terms of mental health, and that is something that you can get help with. I feel like we normalize people who aren't able to have self-control because there's so many of us that struggle with it, whether we have a mental illness or not. And just if you were to put impulse control on a continuum as a single symptom that's actually common across many mental problems, you can be on the abnormal side of that without having a mental disorder, and you can get help for it. She talked about people trying to treat that sort of thing by avoiding all of like beauty YouTube, and avoiding emails, and avoiding looking at makeup websites. And she was saying that when you face those things, I think she said something like your character is stronger and you're able to, I guess it was, her idea was more like learning how to build that muscle, like a mental muscle, against being easily influenced. And I just wanted to, again, add that if you feel like you have to avoid these things in order to stop yourself from buying them, that might be more than just a choice. That might be a mental disorder, or it could be a strong abnormal symptom, but possibly not enough of the symptoms here to be considered clinically significant to get the disorder. I'm stumbling over my words because I'm just thinking too much. I think this next part, it was partially me writing what she was saying and partially me writing what I'm saying, so I'm just going to read it to you. Facing it teaches you how to think critically. Often now my first response is to think of what I already have, how much of a palette I actually use, and how ludicrous influencers sound when they say you should buy things. It's clear to me now what's wrong with the dialogue around makeup, and I'm not influenced by it. An example being large collections gross me out. I actually get like a feeling of discomfort when I see larger collections. And avoiding isn't the same as learning, it's just putting it off, which for some might be financially responsible. If you're someone who's in debt and you need to cut off spending immediately, blocking yourself from everything might be beneficial. But if this is for you more than just a choice, it isn't going to heal itself. Like, I've been panning and watching declutter videos and putting myself in the mindset where I can declutter and buy less for a long time, and now shopping isn't a problem for me. But the hoarding is still there. It's just a matter of, am I able to recognize it and work against it, or I guess work with it to be better. But the thing is, I never went to therapy for it. I never got treatment for it as a child or an adult. So it's still something I have to deal with. And I also wanted to add that getting help, even if you don't think you have a disorder, there's nothing shameful about going to a therapist. And therapy can actually help everyone, pretty much. If you don't have a disorder, you can go to therapy. There's the myth that you have to be sick to get help, and that's just not true. A lot of people who don't have a mental disorder or a mental illness go to therapy just to help relieve stress or to think through problems they're having or anything like that. And I don't want this video to sound like I'm trying to diagnose anyone. I think it wouldn't be statistically possible, or it wouldn't statistically make sense for everyone in the beauty community to have hoarding disorder or a mental disorder. That wouldn't make sense. But I think there are a few people, there's a small number of people who will have it that are attracted to the community. And to those people, I would say it's in your best interest to not just try to cover up the symptoms through panning and a no-buy. I think those kinds of things are beneficial in addition to treatment. But then more for the broader community, I just think it's something interesting to think about how we're sort of, I'm saying we, but I know I have the disorder, but adopting that mindset is not normal, and it's something to work on. And I guess I sort of have the question for everyone else of, how do you feel you fit into this? Do you feel like any of this is relevant to you? Because I can only know what I'm thinking, and it's possible I'm just projecting my own thoughts and feelings onto what I'm seeing in other people. So I guess it's a question of everyone else's perspective on this, because maybe from other people's point of view, this isn't relevant. I can't think of anything else to say right now, so if I do, I'll film a little bit tomorrow or whatever. And I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.